parents skipped my wedding for my brother's vacation, so I got married without them. Now they're heartbroken. Growing up, my parents and I were incredibly close. We always shared a bond that felt unbreakable, and I knew they cared deeply about me. Family was everything, and as I got older, I always imagined that they would be there, standing by my side, for the biggest moments in my life. So when I finally got engaged, I was beyond excited to share the news with them. After all, this was the day I had dreamed of for so long, and I couldn't wait to include them in every little detail. When I told my parents about the wedding, their reactions were exactly what I had hoped for. At first, they were thrilled, asking about the details, when the wedding would be, what kind of dress I had in mind. It felt like the happiest moment of my life. We started planning together, and I could see the joy on their faces. I was going to get married, and my parents would be right there, by my side, cheering me on. I imagined how it would feel to have them walk me down the aisle, how we'd all celebrate together. But as the wedding date started to approach, things began to take an unexpected turn. It all started when my brother announced that he was planning a vacation. At first, it seemed like a simple thing, a nice trip he had been looking forward to. But then I realized that his vacation was scheduled right around the same time as my wedding. I didn't think much of it at first. Vacations are important after all, and my brother deserved to have a good time. But as the date neared, I began to notice something unsettling. My parents, who had once been so excited about the wedding, started talking more and more about my brother's trip. The tone began to change. They kept telling me how his vacation was a big deal, how he'd been planning it for months, and how they had to prioritize it. It didn't take long before I began to feel like my wedding was slipping down their list of priorities. They kept reassuring me that they'd try to make it work, that they would be there. But I could feel the shift. They started saying things like, "Well, we'll see if we can make it, but we have to think about the vacation too." The more they talked about it, the more it hurt. This wasn't just any event. It was my wedding, the one day that I had been dreaming of for as long as I could remember. And suddenly, it seemed like they were treating it as an afterthought. It was hard to accept, especially when I saw how much attention they were giving my brother's trip. The more they discussed it, the clearer it became that they were leaning toward missing my wedding. Their excuses seemed endless. His trip was too important, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and they couldn't just cancel. As the days went on, I began to realize that I was being asked to share my special day with someone who had no plans to show up. My wedding day was supposed to be a celebration of my love, but it felt like my family was already making excuses not to be there. The weight of it all hit me. I had been dreaming of this day for so long, and now it was being overshadowed by a vacation that, in my eyes, was becoming more important than the wedding itself. It all came to a head one evening when I was sitting with my parents at the dinner table. The conversation had been light earlier, but then my dad dropped the bombshell. He said, "We've been talking, and it's going to be tough for us to attend your wedding. We've already committed to your brother's vacation, and it's hard to rearrange everything last minute." I couldn't believe it. My heart sank. For weeks, I had been hearing them talk about how they were going to make it work, how they'd try their best to be there. But now, suddenly, it was clear. They were choosing his vacation over my wedding. I looked at my mom, hoping for some reassurance, but she didn't say anything. I felt like the room had gone silent, and all I could hear was the loud pounding in my chest. I tried to stay calm, but inside, I was shaking with anger and hurt. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, and yet, here they were, telling me they couldn't make it. I had spent my whole life imagining them there with me, supporting me, and now it felt like they were abandoning me for something as trivial as a vacation. I couldn't understand it. How could they do this to me? How could they choose a trip over the day I had been waiting for? A day I had spent years planning. I'll never forget the look on their faces as they tried to explain. They said they didn't want to upset me, but they had to think about the bigger picture, about their plans with my brother. My dad kept going on about how much he wanted to go on this vacation, and how important it was for him to be there for my brother. I heard the words, but they felt like a distant echo. It was as though everything I had shared with them about my wedding and how much it meant to me no longer mattered. My heart ached in a way I had never known. I felt betrayed. How could they just brush me off like this? That night, I went to bed with a heavy heart. I couldn't stop thinking about what they'd said, replaying it over and over in my head. I couldn't understand why they would make this choice. But as the days went on, I started to come to a painful realization. They weren't going to change their minds. No matter how much I begged or how many times I tried to reason with them, they had already made their decision. I knew then that I had a choice to make. I could let their absence ruin my wedding, or I could move forward without them. At first, the thought of getting married without my parents felt impossible. It seemed like such a huge, painful loss. But deep down, I knew I couldn't let them control the day that was meant to be about my love, my future. It was my day, and I had the right to celebrate it the way I saw fit. I wasn't going to let their decision define my happiness. So, I made the choice. I decided to go ahead with the wedding, even if it meant facing the harsh reality that my parents wouldn't be there. It was the hardest decision I'd ever had to make, but it also gave me a sense of strength I hadn't known I had. I realized that no matter how much it hurt, I needed to stand up for myself. I had to put my happiness first. That decision wasn't easy, though. The more I thought about it, the more I understood the fallout it would bring. The conflict with my parents was inevitable. There was no way they would be okay with it. I knew that by choosing to marry without them, I was risking our relationship forever. But in that moment, I couldn't let their choices control me anymore. I had to do what was right for me. Even if it meant moving on without their support, I couldn't let their absence ruin the love I was about to marry. The morning of my wedding was a whirlwind. I woke up early, with the usual mix of nerves and excitement, but this time, something felt different. As I got ready, I couldn't help but feel the absence of my parents. I had imagined my mom helping me into my dress, my dad seeing me for the first time in my gown, a moment full of joy and emotion. But that morning, I was alone in those moments, without the support I thought would be there. But despite the sadness that lingered in my chest, I knew I had made the right choice. I had decided to move forward, no matter what. I wasn't going to let the hurt hold me back. I had made the decision to marry the love of my life, and I was going to walk down that aisle with pride. But even with that resolve, there was a bittersweetness I couldn't shake. The excitement of marrying my partner was tempered by the hole in my heart where my parents should have been. Thankfully, I wasn't completely alone. I had my closest friends and family there to support me. My cousins, who had always been like siblings to me, were there helping with the little details, making me laugh when the nerves almost took over. My aunt, who had always been my second mom, was by my side all day, reminding me how loved I was and how proud she was of me. It didn't take away the sadness, but it helped ease the pain of missing my parents. The people who were there truly made me feel like I was still surrounded by love, and that gave me strength. The ceremony itself felt like a dream, but not the one I had imagined. As I stood at the front of the aisle, looking out at all the smiling faces of the people who came to support me, I couldn't help but notice the empty seats. Those were the seats that were supposed to be filled by my parents. I tried to focus on the moment, on the vows I was about to say, but my mind kept drifting back to them. What would it have felt like to have them there? To hear my dad's voice cracking as he gave me away? To have my mom there, smiling through her tears as she watched her daughter marry the person I loved? But instead of getting lost in that sadness, I forced myself to breathe. I had already made the choice to keep moving forward. I couldn't let my parents' absence take away from what was happening in front of me. I looked at my partner and everything else faded. This was the moment I had been waiting for, and nothing else mattered. Saying I do without my parents was painful, but it was also freeing. I realized that I had the power to create my own happiness, and I didn't need anyone's approval to make that happen. The ceremony, though different from what I had envisioned, was still beautiful. The love that filled the room, the warmth of the people who stood by me, it all made the moment feel complete, even without my parents. After the ceremony, I knew there was no way to avoid the fallout. I didn't hear from my parents immediately, but I knew they were upset. It didn't take long for them to reach out, and when they did, it wasn't with congratulations. My mom's voice was cold on the phone, asking why I went through with it without them. She didn't say much else, but I could hear the disappointment in her voice. My dad called the next day, his tone just as heavy. He didn't yell, but I could feel the hurt in his words. He said, "I can't believe you went ahead without us. We were your parents. We should have been there." It stung, hearing them express their disappointment so openly. But as much as I hated to hurt them, I couldn't regret my decision. I had chosen to move on, and in doing so I had learned that I could stand up for myself, even if it meant going against what I thought was expected of me. The guilt was there, yes, but so was a quiet sense of pride. I didn't back down, and I didn't let their choices dictate my happiness. In the days that followed, I had to face the uncomfortable reality that things between us would never be the same. My parents didn't understand my decision, and they made it clear that they were hurt. But I had already moved forward. I was married, and I was happy, despite the emotional toll it had taken. In the days and weeks following the wedding, the atmosphere in our family was nothing short of tense. It was like walking on eggshells whenever we spoke. My parents, especially my mom, couldn't hide the heartbreak in their eyes when we talked. They didn't understand why I went ahead with the wedding without them. They kept asking me why over and over, as if expecting me to give an answer that would somehow make everything okay. But there was no easy answer. I had made my decision, and it wasn't one I could just take back. It hurt me to see them so devastated, but at the same time, I couldn't help but feel the weight of their choices. The more they expressed their pain, the more I started questioning if I had made the right decision. Part of me felt guilty for going ahead without them, but the other part of me knew I had done what was best for me. I had to choose my happiness. I had to choose the person I was marrying. I couldn't let their absence overshadow my joy. But the guilt was still there, lingering like a shadow. I wanted to make things right, but I also didn't want to go back on the decision that had shaped one of the most important moments of my life. As the days went on, I could feel a shift in my relationship with my parents. They started to reach out more, trying to make amends, but it wasn't the same. Their calls were full of apologies, but there was something forced in their tone. It was like they were trying to convince themselves, as much as me, that everything was fine. I kept wondering, were they truly sorry for missing the wedding, or was this just about their pride? Were they sorry because they missed out on such a big moment in my life, or were they just upset because I didn't need them there? The confusion I felt during this time was overwhelming. On one hand, I wanted to believe their apologies were genuine. But on the other hand, it felt like they were more upset about the situation than they were about missing my wedding. It was hard to tell whether they were really understanding my feelings, or if they were just trying to cover up their own embarrassment and hurt. The impact on our family dynamic was hard to ignore. Things were never the same after that. I noticed the tension growing, not just between me and my parents, but within the entire family. My brother, who I thought would be the most understanding, seemed to take sides with our parents. I don't think he meant to, but I could tell that he was angry with me for going through with the wedding without our parents there. It felt like the entire situation had caused a divide between us. It was like I had done something unforgivable in their eyes. And then there were my parents. They seemed to shift the blame to me in some ways, making me feel like the fallout was my fault. They would say things like, "If only you had waited, we could have all been there for you." Or, "You knew how important that trip was to your brother." It felt like they were trying to make me feel responsible for everything that went wrong, instead of acknowledging that their choice to prioritize my brother's vacation over my wedding had consequences. The blame wasn't just on me, but it felt like I was the one carrying the burden. Every family gathering became uncomfortable. My parents would give me these looks, the kind that said they were disappointed in me, but didn't know how to say it. My brother barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was like nothing had happened. But I knew it wasn't the same. It was as if the space between us had grown wider with every passing day. I couldn't help but feel like I was being punished for a decision that, in my heart, I knew was right for me. The hardest part was knowing that no matter how much time passed, things would never go back to how they were before. Our family would never be the same again, and no matter how much we tried to fix things, the damage was done. It wasn't until weeks after the wedding that my parents seemed to truly understand the weight of their decision. It was a quiet moment, one I didn't expect. My mom called me one evening, her voice shaky. She didn't have to say much, but I could hear the regret in her words. "I've been thinking about everything, and I just want you to know how sorry I am." The words were simple, but in that moment, I knew they were coming from a place of deep emotion. I could tell that she finally understood the impact her choice had made, and the hurt it caused me. I had expected an apology at some point, but hearing it now, it felt bittersweet. It was almost like everything that had happened was sinking in for them, but it was too late. They had missed the most important day of my life. And while I appreciated her apology, part of me couldn't help but feel like it didn't change anything. My wedding day had passed, the memories had been made, and they weren't a part of it. I had moved on, and as much as I wanted to believe their apology was sincere, it didn't erase the pain. The truth was, I had been heartbroken too. I never expected my parents to choose anything over being there for me on my wedding day. I felt betrayed, confused, and angry. I spent nights lying awake, wondering if there was something wrong with me for making the decision to go ahead with the wedding without them. But in the end, I realized I had done what was right for me. I had to protect my own happiness, even if it meant upsetting them. There were moments, especially in the days following the wedding, when I felt angry, not just at my parents, but at the situation. I had hoped for a different outcome, one where they would show up, happy and proud, to celebrate with me. But that didn't happen. Instead, I was left to navigate all these emotions alone. I had to make sense of the hurt, but also of my own strength. I had a choice to make, to hold on to the bitterness and let it define me, or to accept what had happened and focus on my future. When my parents realized the impact of their actions, I saw the tears in their eyes. It was like they were finally seeing what I had felt all along. But as much as I wanted to forgive them right away, it was complicated. There was a part of me that still hurt. I had spent so much time, energy, and love building the relationship I thought we had, and it had been shaken to the core by their absence. That's when I realized the importance of protecting my own happiness, my own peace. Even though I wanted to make things right with them, I had to understand that it wasn't just my responsibility to make everything okay. I needed to move forward, even if they weren't on the same page. They may have been heartbroken, but I couldn't sacrifice my own happiness for their comfort. That was the hardest lesson I had to learn. The pain I felt wasn't something that could be fixed with a simple apology, and I knew I couldn't keep waiting for them to fix it. It was up to me to heal, to protect my future, and to keep living my life, with or without them by my side. In that moment of realization, I made peace with myself. Yes, I was hurt. Yes, I was angry. But I knew that I couldn't hold on to those emotions forever. I had to keep moving forward for my own well-being. Looking back on everything that happened, I've learned so much from this experience. The biggest lesson, perhaps, is the importance of standing firm in your decisions, even when they're incredibly difficult. When I decided to move forward with my wedding without my parents, I wasn't just making a decision about that one day. I was choosing my own well-being, my happiness, and my future. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one for me at the time. What I realized through all this is that sometimes we have to put ourselves first. There will be moments in life when we face tough choices, and not everyone will understand or agree with our decisions. But the truth is, our happiness and self-respect should always come first. I had to prioritize my own heart, my own peace of mind, even if it meant hurting others in the process. In the end, no one else can live your life for you. Only you have the power to decide what's best for you. I hope that this story helps you see that it's okay to make those difficult choices when necessary. We all have our own journeys, and sometimes that means standing up for ourselves, even when it's hard. If there's one takeaway I want to leave you with, it's this. Sometimes we have to make hard choices in life, and not everyone will understand. But the most important thing is to stay true to yourself. Stay grounded in who you are, and always do what feels right for you, even if it means walking a difficult path. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a family member skip an important event for what seemed like a trivial reason? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts and experiences.